Perfect. Perfect. Well, I just don't like that it's the first person. Like maybe we should all sit down one. Now I feel like I'm far away from you guys though. All right. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Michelle Rainey, and I am a program specialist here at Johnson County Library. And I have worked with Ashley Fick and our team for several years on these programs, so I'm excited to be here with you today. I want to begin by thanking our legislators for joining us and taking time out on their Saturday morning to connect with their constituents and community. I also want to thank all of you for doing the same. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes. If you'd like to submit a question, use the note card provided on your chair. And be sure to write legibly and phrase your question as a clear question. We can't ask it if we can't read it or if there's not a question. We also ask that you refrain from commenting out loud, clapping, and please definitely refrain from booing. This will help us keep things moving and allow us to answer as many questions as possible. It will also help us to maintain a respectful and civil conversation. We'd also like to note that we invite every legislator with constituents in Johnson County to participate in these coffees. Today, Jan will be keeping time for us and helping keep us honest. We'll open with 3 minutes for each of our legislators to introduce themselves and share what they're working on. But before we jump into that, I do want to let you all know that an opinion poll from March 2025 found that 72% of Americans desire to be part of the solution in restoring civility to our country. And 80% of us believe that we can settle differences without personal attack. So that is part of why we do what we're doing here today. And so we'll start again with each legislator will have 3 minutes, and we will start with Senator Holscher.
Great. Good morning. I'm Senator Cindy Holscher. So wonderful to see all of you here today. Happy to say it's great to be back in Lenexa, because at one point Lenexa was part of my district, but then, redistricting happened and some borders changed and that type of thing. So, but like I said, really happy to be here. My district now goes from Flum almost all the way over to the Missouri state line, and then roughly 127th Street up to, 91st. So it's not a clear, complete line. It's a little jagged in different spots, but to give you a rough outline, that's the area. So very, very robust area economically, lots of hospitals. JCCC is there. So like I said, a pretty busy district. This year in the Senate, I serve on 4 committees in particular, very consistently, and then there's some other committees that kind of pop up every so often, like the legislative post audit. That one doesn't meet every week, but off and on. But my main committees are public health, which I have been on the entire time I've been in the legislature, starting back in 2017 on the House side. So there's public health. I am on the COJ committee, which is basically modeled after the DOGE committee, which was on the federal level. Additionally, I'm on budget, ways and means, and utilities. I would tell you utilities is the smoother committee, I guess, to say, in terms of the issues that are handled there. Nothing too controversial, but the other committees do tend to get a number of things brought before us that can, like I said, be a bit controversial at times. For public health, honestly, up until last year, we were still handling COVID bills, even though we're 5 years beyond COVID. We were still seeing masking bills and some other things. I'm happy to say it feels like we have finally moved past that this year and handling some other issues. I think the big victory there this year is expedited partner therapy finally passed out of committee. We were only one of 2 states to not implement that type of treatment. So hopefully we're moving in the right direction there. Budget, we did pass out a budget. Myself and Senator Pat Petty, we were the 2 no votes on it because, one, it does not fund education the way it should. Specifically, special education is not funded near to where it should be. And then on COJ, plenty of very concerning bills coming from there. And honestly, the big work there has been pushing back and stopping as many as we can. And most of those bills have had the focus on, just like we saw on the federal level, not so much becoming efficient, but taking away benefits from vulnerable people. So unfortunately, that has become the focus. So I will keep doing everything I can to push back against the bad bills and do what I can to pull some good things forward. So thank you for being here.
Good morning. I'm Senator Dinah Sykes. I represent the 21st District, and you're in the 21st District, so it's great to have you in Lenexa. I also represent parts of Miriam, Shawnee, and Overland Park. I also have the privilege of serving as the Senate Democratic leader and kind of spearheading and making sure all of our Democratic senators are on different committees and kind of maintaining kind of floor debate and things like that. I serve on LCC, the Legislative Coordinating Council, State Finance Council, and then my one standing committee that I meet regularly in the session is Senate Education, and then I also am Vice Chair of Confirmation Oversight. So this has been a crazy session, a little bit similar to last year. Part of the difference is the legislature took over writing our budget, and I think everyone up here and everyone agrees that the legislature should dig in and understand the budget more, but that doesn't mean that we have to be the ones writing the budget. So typically the governor would pass her or introduce her budget on the first Thursday of the session, and then the Senate and the House would start from that and then have hearings going through, meeting with the agencies, talking about things that they liked, things that they didn't like, things that they wanted. Other people in the community would come trying to make sure that pieces of the budget that needed to be adjusted, and then we would pass a budget from that. We have started with a special budget committee, and instead of having the agencies before us, we would have the research analyst who would talk to us. So we really weren't able to ask those questions of why an agency was requesting something, what it was needed for, and so it's really put more of a strain on the whole legislative process, because with taking the onus of that budget process, then you've put more stress on your analyst and the research and revisers. So a lot of the other bills that we would normally be debating at the same time really gets pushed to the side, because the budget is the only thing that we are required by the Constitution that we have to pass every year. That being said, the House passed a budget out of, it was on Wednesday, right? You debated on a Tuesday? Wednesday, and they passed it. The Senate will take up the budget on our side, the Senate version, on Tuesday, and we will be debating that. And then it will go to conference. That is if we have 21 votes. I'm not sure that there are 21 votes to pass the Senate budget out, but we will see. But then we will be in conference committee with the House trying to hash out the differences. Some of those, I think, the House has $10,000 in SPED. 10 million. Sorry, 10 million. It's early. My husband also was on a flight to India today, and it got diverted, and so I'm a little like, where is my husband? So $10 million. The Senate version only has $5 million, so we will hash out those differences in conference. Senate Education has been quite the experience this session. Really, the chair changing what is going to be hearings on, not letting the public know, and I get the stop sign, so not letting people know in a timely manner. So really, I think the biggest thing is that Kansans are not able to be at the table to talk to us and let us know their thoughts and some of the unintended consequences. And because there's a big stop sign, I will stop, but I look forward to your questions.
Good morning. I know times are tough right now. Things are wild. So thank you so much for getting up and at 'em and coming to pay attention to what's going on in our state government. I'm Joella Hoye. I represent House District 17, starting just across the street in parts of Lenexa and Shawnee. I serve on the House Appropriations, Transportation and Public Safety Budget Committees. I also serve as House Minority Whip, and I'm on a few joint committees as well. My priorities for this session were kids eating, kids reading, and public safety. Unfortunately, on feeding children front, the House rejected an amendment to adopt Governor Kelly's budget recommendation that we put $2.5 million in to move our reduced lunch kids to free lunch. So I think this is a really good compromise. We've got our House Democrat plan. We want to do free breakfast and lunch for all kids. States that have done that have found it's pretty expensive. It's pretty tough to maintain that. So Governor Kelly's plan, it just gets those kids that are a family of four making around $60,000 would get free breakfast and lunch at school. So unfortunately, that one did not move forward this year. We'll keep working on it. On the kids reading front, a positive is that the House budget position has the blueprint for literacy funding in it, so that helps educate educators on teaching kids to read and recognizing dyslexia and helping those kids at school. So that's one positive. On the other side of that, our budget does not provide nearly enough funding for special education, as previously mentioned. We haven't done a ton on the way of improving public safety, in my opinion, and the big unfortunate thing that I think we can elaborate on a little bit more is this week, the Department of Revenue sent out letters that 1,700 Kansans that their driver's license and birth certificates are invalidated with no grace period, no notice. We passed SB 244 through the legislature, overrode the governor's veto of that. I voted against that, of course. This bill is unconstitutional. It's very far-reaching, and we should all be very concerned that the government could invalidate anyone's forms of identification overnight like that without warning for anyone for any reason. So I just want to say that we're doing what we can. We're trying to help, but transgender Kansans are wrapped up in this national crusade against trans people. It's unacceptable, and I am just sickened that we couldn't do any better. So thank you on that.
Yeah, it is on. Thank you for everyone for being out here. My name is Susan Ruiz, and I represent District 23. So to the north, it's around 69th Street, because the lines aren't straight. To the west, Flum. To the east, I always forget. Schweitzer, yes, thank you. Why can't I remember? Because Schweitzer really jags all over the place. And then about 106 to the south. The majority of my district is in Lenexa, so I'm happy to be here. I'm on 3 committees. The first one is the Veterans and Military Committee, and then the Social Services Budget Committee, and then Health and Human Services Committee, and I'm ranking on that committee. Senator Sykes talked about the budget and the whole budget process, and that's just, it just really upsets me how we have done that, the whole process for that budget. So there are committees that only focus on us, think of the budget as a pie. And so there are committees that only focus on certain slices of that pie. So social services budget looks at all of the social services, which really is the bulk of the budget itself. Although I voted no on the bill to take it out of committee, it's going now to, or out of the floor, it's going to the Senate. just about everything that we asked for on the social services side was passed. It was approved. So I'm really happy about that. But it was the SPED funding that really got to me, that we are still not funding where we need to be with that. And so my vote was a protest vote for that. We have, again, been on defense most of the time, and which I don't like to be. I think that there's ways that we can compromise and work together and really come up with bills that would actually help a lot of Kansans, but we can't seem to get there. And so all of the, it's more of a culture war that's going on right now. So we're against immigrants. We're against anybody in the LGBTQ community. We're against, people really who are poor, people who are disabled. And so those are the bills that we're seeing. Those are the themes that are coming out of, let's take away, their benefits. Because somebody thinks that we need to save the state 200 and something million, but however, they're not saying where that money's going to. So I'm very skeptical about that. Thank you.
I'm Linda Featherston. I represent the 16th district, which is now entirely in Overland Park. We start up at the mall, go down to the community college, and then down to the KU Edwards campus at 129th Street. I'm the ranking member on local government. I serve on the water committee. I serve on the education committee, and I'm the ranking member on the agriculture committee. And it's been a year of defense and just constantly being on alert at all times for what terrible things are going to happen. So in agriculture, I have invested a lot of time trying to defeat, which didn't work out, a bill that removes liability from pesticide companies for the common practice of failure to warn. Hopefully the Senate will be able to stop that bill, but that's a pretty dangerous bill. In education, we have been fighting vouchers left and right. The expansion to add more money to vouchers when we are not even funding special education is morally untenable to me. We've heard some of the dumbest bills in education this year, like kindergartners should be potty trained. Who cares? This is really just, we have wasted a lot of time in education. So we fight about stupid things. I think on Monday we're going to try take food away from children, so that will be not great. Then, what else have we done? The cell phone bill has been a nightmare. I'm going to try to say something positive. In the water committee, we always do good things. We come together in a bipartisan manner to only focus on improving our water issues. And I do think the budget had some increased funding for water, so that is good. I love being on that committee. I was also a no on the budget that came out of the House because of special ed funding and because of the non-budget related culture war lines that they put into the budget. The budget should be about money. It shouldn't be about beating up on certain pieces of the population. It certainly shouldn't be about impairing intellectual freedom at our colleges and universities. So I think that sums it up.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with our questions, and each legislator will have a couple minutes to respond, or they can decide to not respond. How can you forward a bill without a public hearing? Has this rule exception always been the case?
So I will take that. The first thing that you do as a legislator is you vote on rules. So we vote on Senate rules, the House votes on House rules, and then we vote on joint rules. The last 2 years, I have seen the rules disregarded more than in my 10 years that I have served in the legislature. Actually, just yesterday, if you know, we have turnaround, which is where all the bills should have passed the House and then go to the Senate, and then the bills from the Senate have to have passed unless they're in an exempt committee, which is your Fed and State, tax or Ways and Means, those are exempt committees, so there's a little bit of freedom there. But if it hasn't touched those committees and it hasn't been debated and passed by that chamber, it should be dead. There's ways to bring it back with amendments and things, but just yesterday, I think there were 6 bills that the Senate president retroactively blessed to revive them. So they were zombies, basically. So now they're zombie bills. That's gonna be my new phrase, because he apparently forgot to do this last Thursday when that was the deadline for blessing bills. So, and now I quit. But yes, the rules, it seems that the majority party disregards those and even tradition if it is in their favor. And that's how you have bills where there's testimony or there's a committee hearing, something gets gutted, a new bill gets put in place, no one is there from the public to testify or to talk about these. And it is not the best way to pass policy. It is not good. And it actually goes against everything that we all voted for when we established our rules for the legislature.
Thank you. What are we doing to protect our voting rights and preventing unscheduled and unnecessary redistricting and nationalizing of elections?
Well, first and foremost, the efforts to redistrict here in Kansas thankfully did not move forward. So Kansas chose in a bipartisan manner not to participate in that, which is a very positive thing. And there were some very brave Republicans who took a stand against that and did end up getting some punishments in way of what their choice was. So I think that is a very big positive sign that people were willing to stand their ground against early redistricting and playing around with the maps. So thankfully, that is not going to happen here in our state. I forget the second half of the question now. I got to redistrict. Oh, elections. That is much more concerning. We have in the House side, the chair of elections is running for Secretary of State to oversee the elections. And we're seeing a number of bills coming forward to make it more difficult for people to vote. Of course, the 3-day grace period was ended for returning mail ballots. So we like grace periods for the elections, but not for taking away people's driver's licenses. I mean, it's just been pretty wild to see some of the hypocrisy that has come forward throughout these different things. So for me, our elections are safe and secure, but I do think people need to get on and check your voter registration before you go and make sure that everything is ready to go, because there is hearing from the federal government, they want to nationalize the elections. We've got House elections folks campaigning to make elections more secure under the guise of actually preventing people from accessing voting. So stay alert on that measure. We're doing what we can. We're fighting that. There are Republicans who have been voting against some of these bills. So some of them I think we will be able to stop ultimately, but there is a federal push to make it harder to vote in the midterms.
I will give a plug. There's an Olathe, a ballot that is due for Olathe schools. There is a mail ballot that I delivered mine to the ballot box on my way into the library this morning because it's due by Wednesday, I think.
I have a sheet of paper that lists all of the election bills that have been introduced this session. And I haven't counted them, but what I was told that there were some 20 some odd bills that were introduced, primarily by two people that are both on the elections committee. The primary one is the person from Leavenworth, representative from Leavenworth, who's also running for Secretary of State. And so there's a lot of fear mongering going on and saying that our elections are not, that there's a lot of fraud going on. There's not. There isn't. But if you're interested in knowing what these bills are, you can just come and take a picture of this, and you can look up the bills yourself and see how ridiculous some of these are.
I will mention I want people to celebrate the victory of stopping redistricting because truly, yes, give yourselves applause on that. Because honestly, talk about that started happening back in September when we started hearing the GOP making this push for redistricting. And I know I've got a network of people across the state that I had them start calling and emailing legislators voicing opposition. And they weren't able to get the votes for that special session. That special session could have been particularly dangerous because not only likely would they have taken up redistricting and probably had a better chance of getting it at that point, but they probably would have taken up a couple other issues that would have been concerning as well. So stopping that in terms of a special session was huge. And then the fact, as Joella mentioned, then some of those who didn't sign on as Republicans for the special session, they got punished. And that was actually great news for us because then once they were punished, idea of them coming back and switching over to support redistricting during regular session greatly diminished. So like I said, that was a huge victory for the people. So I'm very thankful for all of you who participated in reaching out and pushing back on that. I do want to add, something was asked about, voting rights, protecting voting rights. I will add to the whole issue of Pat Proctor running for Secretary of State. If you haven't seen it, there's a video out there where he kind of talks about that he doesn't want everybody to be able to vote freely. In fact, he says something like, these women are showing up and ruining elections, or something to that effect. These women are showing up and stealing elections, I think is what he says. So he's already gone after college students in terms of taking away that grace period for ballots, mail-in ballots. But additionally, like I said, he has kind of put out there who his targets are. I will tell you in terms of voting this fall, I'm very concerned about some of our minority communities because of increased ICE activity. My big message there is to encourage people to get a mail ballot so they can vote safely at home and then return it at the ballot drop boxes because there is concern about potential of ICE activity at polling locations. I did introduce a bill prohibiting ICE from coming within 400 feet of a polling location. It was not giving a hearing, so we will have to, as the people, look out for our neighbors and help ensure that they can get their votes in this fall.
I think most everything was covered, but I think it is important to note that a lot of these goofy election bills are nowhere near the 84 votes needed to override a veto. So, a lot of these bills, like especially mail-related bills, they're really hard on rural communities, and people know that, and people don't want to see their constituents disenfranchised. I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time with the Johnson County election office when I was first elected because my election difference was 4 votes on election night. So I had a lot of time to watch the entire process of how mail ballots are taken in, how, if there's some question about somebody's ballot, how the election office handles that. I had a number of girls who had been in my Girl Scout troop when they were in grade school, who this was their first election, and they're showing up on the list if we're concerned about their ballot. Well, they had requested a ballot at home, and it didn't make it, and they got nervous, so then they requested one at college also. And so the election office needed to verify that only one of those ballots was submitted. So I think the instances of voter fraud, I think there was an article by the Cato Institute that was cited on the floor, and it was like 77 ballots cast fraudulently over a period of, it was more than 5 years. Yes, we should strive for 100% valid voting, but we do not have a widespread voting problem.
Okay. Can you talk more about why Kansas citizens don't have a seat at the table on our budget?
Well, as somebody who sits on appropriations and seeing the process, we've really rushed this year. The opportunities are in our budget committees where we hear, like I do transportation and public safety budget, so we do all of those budgets, have hearings on those, and would be opportunities to come testify, but with the process moving so quickly, we started having those hearings before session even started. I don't think people realized we didn't even have some of the agency folks able to make it because it was over the holiday break. So I think that rushing the budget process, trying to outdo the governor somehow, has made it more difficult for people to participate in the process. I don't think we had anyone testify on the actual budget bill hearing in the full committee of appropriations. So pay attention to those budget committees if there are items that are important to you, and don't hesitate to reach out to people on those committees, because that can provide us information that we may not have otherwise had when making those choices. So the House, we passed out our budget, and it turns out it's actually more spending than was in the governor's budget recommendation. So I don't know that we're any better at putting together a budget than the person who's supposed to do it, which is our government and her professional budgeting staff. I did support the budget this year because I'm on the committee, and to be frank with everyone, the main thing I wanted to support is some differences between the House and Senate position. The House has $5.5 million for Blueprint for Literacy, $10 million instead of $5 million over in the Senate for special education, and we've got $5 million in there for safe and secure schools. So there is some additional school funding on our side that I wanted to show some bipartisan support for that House position when the budget moves into conference and they start negotiating between those two. Get as much funding for education as we can possibly get in there, and once we get to that conference committee process, it is even harder for the public to participate. Because if I don't watch those conference committee reports, I do not know what is in the budget until the conference committee report gets to my desk, and then we're probably going to vote on it 30 minutes later. So it is a wild and crazy process, but like I said, reach out to those of us on those committees and let us know what you think. Thank you.
I think Representative Hoye really hit it on the nail on the head with this. So when we took over that process for the legislature, we have a special budget committee. It was really rushed last year, and so this year the Senate President and the Speaker of the House said we're going to start this early, and we all talked about trying to start this process in September. And September came, and then October came, and then November came, and we still had not had the special budget committee called. So right at Thanksgiving and at Christmas time, where a lot of people are busy. I mean, I serve on budget committee, and I had trips that were already scheduled. So I was trying to scramble to get someone to fill my position on that budget committee for those times. But again, all of the fee-funded agencies, they had hearings on these budgets before the legislature was even in session. So the public, you all know that we start our legislative session the second Monday in January, and we had already had hearings on how many, 10, 15 different agency budgets. I mean, more than that. So again, I think the majority party, because they have all the power and they have the votes, they're trying to skirt the process and make it more confusing. And then again, rushing through this process because they don't want their members to hear from you. This last week it was this week. Sorry. I feel like we've been in session for a year and we just finished week 7. But we did the 1616, which is a constitutional amendment on property taxes. And the majority leader called an emergency final action. So normally you debate the bill and then you come in the next day to do the final vote on it. And I said, what's the emergency? And there was excuses about people weren't going to be there on Thursday, so we needed to make sure that we voted early. On Thursday, when I was talking to him, he was like, I didn't want Farm Bureau to twist the arms of the Republicans because I knew we would lose votes. So that is why the public is not in the process. They're trying to skirt the process so that members who might change their vote from what they're being told to do by leadership doesn't have time to hear from you.
I want to add to this too. It kind of made me chuckle when you read the question about why don't citizens have a seat at the table, when frankly, it only feels like a couple people really do, and those are Republican leadership individuals, really crafting the budget and directing things. I will tell you this, I used to design and implement budgets at Sprint for a department larger than the state government. And this whole process last year as well as this year is not anything we would have ever utilized, honestly. In fact, I've mentioned to my peers on committee that if we worked anywhere else, we'd all be fired for the processes that have been utilized. And it's done by design, of course. This very fast process where things are put in very quickly at the very last minute. Last year, there was one good change I will mention, and I will give leadership credit for this. Last year, people were allowed to bring forward provisos without them written down. And I protested heavily at that because we're doing numbers. You need to have that. That's an elementary thing. You've got to have those numbers on paper so there's no misunderstanding. So that was a change from last year to this year. At least things were put on paper. But interestingly, when you're rushing these things and you're excluding the public, there's going to be errors. And we saw that last year. And I recall over the summer during an interim committee, the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, we were in a different meeting, and all of a sudden he said, oh my gosh, there's an error in the budget, and a huge amount of money was taken away from the School for the Blind and School for the Deaf. And he indicated at that point that he really didn't mean for that to happen, but again, that's what happens with things going so fast. Again, things weren't on paper last year, and not enough time to review. So again, some different processes this year, but still not anywhere where it needs to be in terms of the process and what actually needs to be in there. And as I think Linda mentioned earlier, education's supposed to be the focus of the state level in terms of our government and what we're supposed to be dedicating our time to and focus. And huge, huge gaps there in terms of what our obligation is on the state level.
Yeah, and I will add, the governor had a listening tour throughout the state. She probably went to close to a dozen cities where people could show up and say what their concerns were with the budget. And when she got back here to Johnson County, there was one in Leawood, and we were pretty near, if not the last one. And she said the number one thing she had heard across the entire state that people were concerned about budget-wise was schools. Number one. No question. And so what has the legislature done? We've tried to expand vouchers. We take food away from kids. That's not what people have said they are interested in. They are interested in doing the right thing. I mean, I've knocked thousands of doors and brought up special education and all those doors that we are not meeting the law. The law says 92% we're going to pay for. We are now in the 60s. And I will tell you, regardless of party, people's jaws drop. They're like, why? I have never had one person think that was a good idea. When we underfund special education, that money comes out of the regular education budget to the tune of about $1,000 to $1,200 per student. So you may have heard Blue Valley. They're $10 million short in the budget. They're going to have to figure something out. They're thinking about getting rid of fifth grade strings. I'm a music teacher. That is a real problem for me. It's also a real problem for a lot of kids. Those music programs are really important, and all these programs that you send your kids to school for in Johnson County Public Schools, because we are the best schools in the state and some of the best schools in the nation, they are just being chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. And so, the people had a chance to speak. They spoke to the governor, and then the legislature summarily totally ignored the budget that she submitted.
All right. When will we find out how much taxes will increase because of the chiefs? And is it in certain areas of Johnson County or all of it?
My colleagues are like, that's your question. So star bonds are a very complicated, confusing topic. So star bonds stand for sales tax above revenue. So what happens when they take the area that is drawn for the star bond district and they look and see what the base is. So currently, this is what you are receiving in sales tax in this area. And then whatever they decide to pay off for building the Chiefs Stadium headquarters, they have that amount, and they then they go to the Federal Reserve and they sell bonds from private investors that are going to say, we think this is a good investment, and we are going to buy these bonds, that then that sales tax over that base that is coming in from building this new building, and because of the auxiliary things around it, so where the Chiefs Stadium, like if there's hotels, restaurants, bars, all of that extra sales tax is supposed to pay off of that. And the areas in the Star Bond District, local governments can decide whether or not they want to pledge their portion of their sales tax. So like Lenexa, you have the state portion on sales tax, and then you have the local portion. Lenexa has not decided that they will not participate and forfeit their sales tax that they're saying is bringing in. But KCK in the Star Bond District and then part of Olathe have pledged theirs. But the state is not on the hook for this, because it's whoever that is buying those bonds are saying they're taking the risk to pay it off. I will be happy to talk more about this, but the state portion, and I will say, so the Speedway was paid off by Star Bonds. They paid it off a lot faster than the original thought for it. Prairie Star in South Overland Park, that was also a Star Bond district. I think it was not a great use of Star Bonds. Again, we can talk about economic incentives, and I think sometimes we try to put a square peg in a round hole. And so there is trying to make sure that it is the right fit for that. But I do think the extra revenue, and because of the other items that are part of that, bringing hotels, and we've increased like the amount of alcohol tax that then can be recouped for that. So again, that is kind of like quick little thing on Star Bonds, and I'm happy to talk more about it offline.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right.
I will say I have some concerns in terms of, that timing and the huge amount of investment this is calling for. And if you think about it, we have half the population of Missouri in terms of, when you talk about economic burden of such a project, and this is the largest, I believe, public-private investment that we've seen. And I'm hearing from a lot of people that are very concerned about, giveaway to billionaires. And where's the community partnering in terms of, what will Wyandotte County get in terms of, what they're being given through this package. And I think the biggest concern that I'm hearing from economists as well as voters and constituents out there is that, this will be diverting money away from schools, roads, and highways. Now, I also want you to keep in mind that over the years, we had the Brownback experiment that devastated the state, correct? And then in 2017, a group of us worked to end the experiment and get us back on track. Since then, the far right has been working to try to get us back to a Brownback experiment. And they've kind of tweaked some of the brackets and everything. So that upper bracket has been tweaked where there's not as much being gained in terms of revenue. So when you're looking at that and the impact of some of these projects and some of these other things, I guess the answer to my question is I'm concerned it'll be sooner versus later when all of these things start to hit in terms of those changes to the upper brackets, in terms of income tax changes. Again, some of this money for the Chiefs, and then some of the other things that we've seen happen over the years to try to put in pieces of the Brownback experiment.
I do want to add, so we talked about the Star Bond part, but having the headquarters for the Chief in Olathe, all of the income tax from the players, we don't hear about that, but we will be collecting that revenue if Taylor Swift decides to have a concert. Because of all of that income tax for that will also be a part. So we're hearing the sales tax part, but we're not looking at actually what those withholdings from people, because the headquarters of the Chiefs and their salaries will recoup. So just a little part of that that's not out there, that even though sales tax is going to go to pay off those, that income tax that we will be pulling from those salaries is another piece of that.
Okay, thanks. So, what education legislative actions should I be most concerned or excited about?
Well, I am most concerned about the lack of the special education funding in the budget. If we don't keep up with our commitments to provide that funding, and I will insert in here, the federal government is not providing the funding that they're supposed to do for special education. But instead of the state stepping in and helping out with that, we're forcing it all to our local school districts. So without increasing our budget, the governor had put in $50 million. That still wasn't enough to get us to where we needed to be, but it was going to be much better. Keeping it this low is putting us actually backwards on our commitment to fully fund special education. So while we can say schools are fully funded, it is not the state contributing to that. That is our local school districts. And of course, special education students, by law, the schools are going to meet those needs. Those students will have the services they need. As Representative Featherston said, that makes locals have to decide other programming and other areas to cut in order to pay for that special education funding. So as a parent, my son's an 8th grader, that's what's most concerning to me. We don't want to see extracurriculars and, get cut or classroom sizes increase. That is me as a parent and what I'm concerned about personally in the education front. And most certainly we do not want to divert public dollars into private schools, especially when we aren't keeping up our end of the bargain to provide that additional funding for special education.
So there is a whole slew. I will say the highlight of my session so far is that the Senate has not taken up any education bills. So that is like my highlight, because we've had some terrible bills in committee that are really just chipping away, not funding special ed. When we had the budget in Education Committee, I actually made the motion to fully fund at $92 million, and it was a 4-4 vote in committee, and the chair broke the tie saying no. So that was one of those good things. But every attack on education, whether expanding vouchers, and again, I am not against private schools. I think there is a use for that, but you should pay for that, and there are scholarships that are available at those schools. But when you divert funds and then you don't hold them accountable, we get reports from those scholarship granting organizations, and they are required by law to whatever donations that they have, 90% of those have to be distributed in scholarships within 36 months. Legislative post-audit, time and time again, has done some studies on that, and they're not actually fulfilling the statute, the law, to get those dollars out there. I have asked for an updated legislative post-audit, and it has not been approved by the committee. So if we are, let's make sure that we are holding them to the same standards. And again, the bills that we're hearing in Senate Education are really just attacking our public schools and trying to make it harder. So again, the blueprint for literacy, we were one of the first states in the country to push through this legislation, and it was very great. And then the next year, we started defunding something. So we put in high thresholds to improve our literacy rates, and we were seeing that even with our preschool students. Like right now, I serve on the children's cabinet, and with the Dolly Parton Library, where if you, from birth to age 5, you can sign up and get your kid a free book every month. And we're seeing that with some of our preschool grant programs. We're seeing those kids going into kindergarten better with reading. And then we were looking at this to teach our teachers the science of reading. And then the legislature, because they're seeing those advancements, they start pulling back the funds because they don't want our public schools to achieve what we know they can.
So I do think special education is the number one thing we should be concerned about. I was looking up something we got when the superintendents from Johnson County came to the legislature to meet with us. So sped costs are up 11% in Johnson County alone. That's over $27 million. The House is proposing $10 million. We are going backwards. And though people are going to say, oh, we put in all this money, because the last time we had an election year, there was $75 million put in, and you have to maintain that effort. But as costs rise, as more children end up in special education, and we're talking kids who need like some help with reading, we're talking gifted kids. I mean, there are a lot of kids that touch special education. We're not solely talking about the profoundly handicapped children, although they are extremely an important part of this puzzle. But, you know, yeah, so people are saying, oh, we put in all this money. Well, the money is not even keeping up with inflation, and that is to the detriment of everybody else. I think one thing in the voucher bill that often goes unmentioned is the expansion of the federal voucher program, or really it's a new program. So that program would allow families in Johnson County that earn $300,000 to take tax dollars or take credits to their private school, but they'll also say you can use it in your public school for your education foundation. However, it must go directly to students. So like Shawnee Mission Education Foundation, my daughter uses them every year to take field trips to the symphony. That's what we use our education foundation. So it's going to actually defund the education foundation, because you're going to have to use 90% of these free dollars, which nothing's ever free, directly to students. So for like uniforms, I don't think we have a lot of schools in Johnson County that are public schools that have uniforms. So that's really concerning, because people are like, we just need to opt in, everybody else is doing that. That is the exact same argument we can make for Medicaid expansion, and we've seen how that's gone in Kansas.
I'll mention, one of the things that we commonly hear from the other side when they're trying to cut funding for schools or not approving additional funding, they'll say, but we're putting more money than ever, or more money than we've put in over the past 10 years into our schools. Yeah, that's actually true, because remember 2015, 2016, that time frame, at the height of the Brownback experiment, I mean, funding was way down here. So yes, we've had to build back over the years. And at that point too, at the height of the experiment, we were losing teachers. We were hemorrhaging in terms of teachers leaving the profession. We didn't have supplies. And it was a very concerning time. So yes, we have built back from there, but we still are just barely at adequate funding on general education and not where we need to be on special ed. Again, I do want to highlight a victory for the people and by the people from last year, because a number of folks across the state, again, picked up their phones and emailed. Every single voucher bill was stopped last year. So thank you to you all for those efforts. Yes, she's starting the applause here. So one of the worst bills we've seen this year that's tied to public schools is in the form of, it came through the COGE committee, free lunch verification. Another layer of red tape for families that are eligible for free lunch. And guess what? Efficiency? No, that's not what the goal was here. I mean, it just makes it harder for those vulnerable families to get those benefits. And the price tag on this additional layer of verification, I can't even remember. I feel like it was 500 additional employees, millions of dollars to add this verification level, which by all means, couldn't we have just fed more kids for that? That bill did pass through the Senate, but it did not have a veto-proof majority at anywhere near that, I don't believe. So I think we'll be okay there. My biggest concern in terms of education comes in the form of attacks by vouchers, and we're going to push back against all of those. Teacher pipeline. We've lost a lot of teachers over the past 10 years, so we need to focus on that area. And here's the other thing. There's a lot of talk about property taxes and trying to reduce your property taxes. When the state level doesn't fund education the way we're supposed to, guess what? That gets shuffled to the local levels. The best thing the state could do to help you on those local taxes and property taxes is fully fund general education as well as special education.
Okay, well, we have just a few minutes left, so this will probably be the last question. So it says, what do you think is the best way to get Gen Z interested in their state politics, especially those who are getting close to 18 and can vote?
Well, it's exciting that we have an internship program at the State House. I currently have an intern who is a freshman at the University of Kansas. There can be high school students as well. We have paging opportunities at the State House, and I know that there are numerous school groups that get involved in civics and just building each other up in their school communities. So these are really great opportunities, and I think especially on our college campuses. Yesterday on the House Select Committee on Government Oversight, we were talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and critical race theory because there is a proviso in the budget saying that universities cannot require any classes that have diversity, equity, inclusion, and critical race theory, that's the only definition of what that even means. We had a representative from the Goldwater Institute via WebEx, that's a conservative think tank, and I asked, hey, I was watching the State of the Union this week. President Trump said that DEI has been eliminated in America. Do you agree with that statement? And he said, no, he did not agree with that. There's more work to being done. Our schools are indoctrinating our kids on college campuses. They're being indoctrinated. So if anything, Gen Z, this shouldn't be on them to have to fight this. But I think this is going to engage people to say we have the right to an education. We have a right to the books that our professors want us to read. And this is how we learn to engage in civil and civic debates and still leave the classroom friends. Just because you read a book doesn't mean you can't say that you disagree with it. And so I think that these prohibitions that are going in place on college campuses are probably going to be a big area of interest for that generation. And again, internships. My interns that I've had, they love being in the State House, and they're like, I thought this was going to be boring, but this is they can't get enough. So get them involved.
It starts with the little kids that are running around here. It starts, because that's how it started for me, and being with my parents and their involvement. And always, youngest child, you're always with one of the parents, and so the early exposure to critical thinking, really, to be able to, yes, there is people in authority, but you can question them. And my dad always said that to us. And so I have so much faith in Gen Zers right now, because if you look at our history of our country, so many things, so many movements starts with young people. And a lot of it started in the college campuses. So I really want to support them and be able to raise their voices about whatever it is that they are concerned about. That's important. Being an intern with us is awesome, but you could also come and spend the day with us and not have to be an intern. You can spend a day or two. We call it being a legislator for the day. Parents, everyone in the audience, you're welcome. You can ask your legislator, or you can ask one of us if you could just spend the day with us. So you go to every committee we go to. You go to every caucus meeting that we can. The other side has closed their caucus meetings, and they won't even let the press in. The caucus meetings on the House side is open to the public, and the press is there. People are always there, and so we're able to bring our interns in, anybody who's there for the legislator for the day. You get to be on the floor, not up in the balcony, because when you're on the floor, you could hear everything that goes on, and you can see body language, all the debates, arguments we might have, it's all there. So it's very interesting for people to do that. Educating yourself, being here, all of these things are what's going to help our younger people. And when they see you fighting and questioning, they hear it. And you could be a 7-year-old like I was, or you could be, an 18-year-old.
Yeah, so I am always amazed at the young people. I had several groups in my office this week. There was a group from Iola, Kansas. They were there for Zero Reasons Why, which they just started. If you're not familiar, Zero Reasons Why is trying to destigmatize getting help for mental health issues. So they started this chapter in Iola in January, and they were in Topeka this week. And so very excited of how they were engaging in their community. I also am a mentor through Shawnee Mission School District for Women in Leadership. And I had a young lady also this week who spent the day with me. So there's a lot of things like that. The Mom's Demand, when Representative Ruiz was talking about the kids, I have fruit snacks in my office, and the little kids who are there with their moms and dads for Mom's Demand are always, they know that they can come to my office and get fruit snacks. And one of them was like, "How do you know?" She was like, "I'm here a lot." So, but I think young people are paying attention, and they can help on campaigns. They can spend a day with us in the legislature. I was at the UPS store getting a post office box, and they, I forgot to sign something, so they called me back. And then when I went back, they were like, "We figured out who you are." And then this girl was like, "My boyfriend is interested in politics. Can he come and shadow you?" I was like, "Sure." I knew nothing about this kid. And then my chief of staff was like, "You didn't ask questions?" I'm like, "No, if they want to be involved, like, come on." So I had to spend it. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for them to get engaged. And just like everyone, like, what is your comfort level? And we can kind of build from there.
I'll say last Friday I was at Shawnee Mission South. They do Principal for a Day, which is not really doing any principal work, but we did it this year and last year, and part of that is a town hall with the AP government kids, and those kids are smart. They ask very pointed and directed questions, and that was after they'd all been screened by their teacher. Like, these kids know what is going on. They know their power. We, I think, as adults need to, or as full-grown adults, we need to make sure that our college kids know how to access their ballot at college. And moms and dads, that might mean that you need to go pick that ballot up, sign everything properly, and drive it back. Like, they need to know that their vote counts. I'll again say, my seat has been decided by as few as 4 votes before me. I mean, it really, really matters. We have all kinds of leadership in the House that were decided by 100 votes, 200 votes. That could be a huge flip if we could get our young people engaged. And I will say, my daughter was knocking doors starting in high school. Cindy's daughter was out knocking in middle school. Kansans are wonderful people. People are nice to you at the door. They're good people. And to hear what they're concerned about, and then to be able to remind them, like, there's an election coming up, because it happens all the time that people are like, there's an election? Yes. What's it about? Oh gosh, I thought I told you everything. I mean, here we are. So it's just, we just have to keep helping them and keep providing that opportunity for these young people to actually vote and to help them vote.
I'll say that I see Gen Z being very active politically. It might be different than the way we're active, and it might be in different places. But what I do see is the disconnect between then the need to vote. But that's not just Gen Z. That's every age group I see. And what appears to happen is, I think a lot of voters become apathetic because of the federal level, because of the Electoral College, right? You vote, but it feels like your vote doesn't really count on that level. And when people mention that to me, I concede to them. I'm like, yeah, I get that. Your vote doesn't feel like it counts on the federal level. But on the state and the local level, absolutely. And to Linda's point, 4 votes made a difference between her win and a very, very extreme person who was on the ballot. So I say this, to everybody here in this room. Find 5 friends that aren't consistent voters. We all have them. Every election that rolls around, I will send out an email. I'll send out a text to 200 people on this text tree that I have. And I'll say, hey, it's usually about a week and a half before the election day. I'll say, have you voted yet? Big election's coming up. And I usually send that to about 200 people. Half of them will respond something like, oh crap, there's an election? I mean, people get busy. They're working 2 jobs. They're shuttling kids to soccer. That reminder is so absolutely important. Then typically what I hear back from those folks who, forgot there was an election coming up, is they'll ask, where do I vote? Who do I vote for? So those reminders, that's your power of influence with your circle of friends. And like I said, we all have at least 5 friends who aren't consistent voters. And it is so important to turn out every single year, every single election cycle. I mean, I've got a race coming up, but I'm committed to helping flip at least 5 of these House seats because this is unsustainable where we are. I mean, they're chipping away at voting rights. They're chipping away at our public school funding and democracy in general. So I'm going to do everything I can. So I ask each of you, start now on finding those 5 friends who, like I said, haven't been consistent voters. And if you want to be an overachiever, go for 10, and I thank you for that.
All right, well, we are at time. If we were unable to get to your question, please take time to chat with the legislators now, or you can use the follow-up sheet to contact them. There should have been one either on your seat or near your seat. We'd also like to invite you to join us at future legislative coffees. There's always something to learn, and even if your representative or senator is not the one speaking. And also a reminder that we do invite all of the legislators that have constituents in Johnson County to be a part of these legislative coffees every year. So thank you, legislators, for coming. Thank you, patrons, for coming. And please feel free to grab a coffee or a donut on your way out. I know. I was like,